LimaCharlie Net is the big topic today. So I'm Maxim. What we're going to do is we'll take you through, what is LimaCharlie Net at a high level, kind of the high level benefits, and then we'll quickly get into really all the different aspects of LimaCharlie Net. So how enrollment works, how policies work, and then we'll go into a demo and show you what that looks like in practice, how you operate it, and all that stuff. So let's begin doing this. So for this, I will share my screen. Perfect. All right. So to talk at a high level about LimaCharlie Net, let's talk at a high level. So I'm going through limacharlie.io/net, where we put some information. I'll zoom in a little bit around this particular graph. So LimaCharlie Net operates in a space that you probably have heard a bunch of different terms around it. Just to name a few, there's the zero trust space. There is also perimeter, software-defined perimeter, a lot of things like in that space. Ultimately, what we're really talking about is micro-segmentation of devices. So giving you control over network activity and all things network, really, at a device level, but based in the cloud. So what that means is that we go from a generally, like, this is a very general architecture where you may define your perimeter on perimeter firewalls in your company. This is the internet. This is on premises, and that's where you define things. And then you talk a lot about subnets and which subnet has access to what. And we're moving this concept into the cloud and really going natively per device. So what that means is we see it a little bit as an extension of endpoints, right? We at LimaCharlie have done a lot of EDR, XDR. So the idea is that we're taking the same concepts around the control you have on your endpoints and bringing that to network. So now, instead of managing things at a single border where maybe you have a laptop that's on premises and that works fine, but then they go home, how do you manage the network access there? It's a whole different architecture. You need a whole different sets of controls. It can get pretty complex. And we're moving that into devices live each within their own enclave. So each device is controllable, visible per device. So you don't have to deal with, here's the subnet and there's a bunch of things. I'm not really sure what they are in there. And I see just one big pipe of traffic and I have to deal with that one big pipe of traffic as a monolith. Instead, you're saying, here's all the devices that I have on my network, right? So maybe I have some servers. Maybe I have an on-prem Jira server. Then I have some workstations, some laptops as well. And whether the laptop is in the office under, on premises, or it goes home, inherently you get still the same control, same level of control, same level of visibility. You're not losing or shifting your entire visibility every time something moves around. So it allows you to start making access decisions, policies, logging, capture decisions based on very detailed information that about the device and who's on that device, instead of having to deal with kind of nebulous concepts of, well, this is the subnet where all my salespeople go, and hopefully that's it, and put some policies there. It's very coarse. So now you can be very, very fine-grained. And at a high level, that's kind of the shift in connectivity that we're bringing in. So the zero trust aspect, meaning you can define at a device or user level, who has access to what, not which big subnets or anything like that. And it doesn't matter where you are. So we're also, part of this is breaking down a lot of barriers by introducing use cases, like scenarios that you can start dealing with, where let's say you have on premises, you have a server, maybe it's a Jira server internal, and you have salespeople that go on the road and they need to access it. In the kind of old world, you would have had to go and, with your network people kind of trace the whole way in. Okay, that we have a firewall here. We need to, make an exception, like expose a port that goes to a specific machine. There's a whole, ton of heavy duty kind of, moving pieces around. With LimaCharlie Net, now you're able to very simply say, you know what, this LimaCharlie Net device is my Jira server, and I want to expose it to these other devices that you know what they are, you know who they are. And by default, you can do that wherever the devices are. So you could say, my salespeople, whether they're on-prem or they're on the road, they're always still able to access this through LimaCharlie Net in the same way, wherever they are. Obviously, you can get into more details about limiting those where and when those devices try to access. It's super powerful. From a security perspective, it makes it a lot easier to know exactly what impact occurs in terms of connectivity to a device. But also, we're a security infrastructure company. It also means that it makes doing incident response much more easy as well, or the ability to kind of drop into a box. Maybe you have LimaCharlie and EDR installed already there and upgraded to Net. So you get all of a sudden, you get the full, visibility and control on granular on the pipe, whatever is happening from a network perspective on that host. So you're able to start isolating specific things, sinkholing specific DNS or IPs, but also, doing a lot of the kind of the bread and butter of incident response and security, which is doing things like PCAP, right? The ability to run PCAP in a large scale in a way that you can handle, right? You're not trying to run PCAP over like a 10 gig Ethernet link, which can be challenging, but rather you're always dealing with one device specifically. So the last bit of the overview that I wanted to chat about is what's the underlying mechanism here? So we did not reinvent the wheel, meaning that the underlying mechanism that we're using to create those network pipes, between devices and the cloud, each other, and the internet, is based on a VPN technology called WireGuard. So it's one of the latest technologies out there, and it's kind of differentiated by very, very wide support for platforms, simplicity. And in fact, it's the simplicity of that technology that means that the Linux kernel has now started to embed and officially support WireGuard as part of the Linux kernel, because they recognize that this is one of those kind of game-changing solutions for VPNs in the future. So we rely on that to kind of use the underlying mechanism, provide support for all the platforms. So we'll go from Windows, Mac, Linux, containers, mobile phones, Chrome and Chrome OS. All of this is completely supported. All right. So that's kind of the high level pitch. Let's get into the more interesting details of all of this. So for this, I will pivot into really kind of a demo. I'll show you an organization in LimaCharlie, what it looks like, how it's set up, how things are structured. If you're familiar, or if you're not familiar with LimaCharlie, an organization is a tenant for us, right? Like we're multi-tenant first. So we're kind of designed for scaling things like MSSPs. We're really built from the ground up for this. So an organization is a tenant. Here we have a tenant called LC Demo. We have a few sensors already here. So we've got 2 Windows boxes. We have 2 Chrome agents and 1 LimaCharlie Net agent already running. But we'll get to show you how we got there. So the very first thing as you want to start trying out LimaCharlie is to actually enable it. So you create your tenant, takes a couple of seconds to create it. You go into add-ons, APIs, and it's not enabled by default. You can enable LC Net right here. Do note that for various reasons, us trying to prevent abuse and things like that, it will require you to not be on the free tier. So it's really the only feature that's not available on the free tier. We want to prevent possible abuse by people, using this as a anonymous VPN service. So once you come in, through billing, you go outside of the free tier. That can be as little as 3 sensors, next to nothing, and then you click on this enable LCNet. The second thing that you have to think about, if you are an existing LimaCharlie user in an existing LimaCharlie organization tenant, is that we've introduced, when we released LimaCharlie Net, new sets of permissions. Those permissions, as we created them and added them, do not get backfilled automatically into your user. So you may have to go in users, go in here into your specific user and make sure that you enable them. So we are talking about, let me see, net. So net.provision, which is a permission that will allow you to provision new network endpoints. And I'll get into how all that. Policies get and set, which is, again, reading policies, see what's going on, and then setting, changing, deleting policies. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of LimaCharlie Net. When you create a LimaCharlie Net endpoint, it will appear just like any other endpoint. So you can see it. There's one existing here already. It appears at its own platform. If I recall, it's the WireGuard platform, the WireGuard architecture, something along those lines. And it's treated as an endpoint. That means that you use the same mechanism as normal EDR endpoints for most tasks, like dealing with quota, like number of endpoints that you have connected, but also deleting a specific endpoint to stop it from connecting into your organization and dealing with those things. Enrolling can be done. Enrolling a new endpoint can be done in a couple of different ways. So let's go again. Install sensors, right? Which is the normal, the natural way that you would go and deal with sensors on EDR. It's pretty much the same on Net. So in this case, if I scroll down, I can go here, provision Net client. So there's a couple of different ways that you can provision Net client. I'll start with the simplest and describe the more complex and useful ones. So at the simplest level, I can go here. I can say select an installation key. I'm going to use Net. Again, that allows you to just pre-tag your endpoint with that with various tags, kind of keep some logic there. The client name, I can either make this any arbitrary value that I want. It's going to be listed as like the host name for that EDR endpoint. However, I get a few free things if I use an email address. So, if you're dealing with, trying to deploy LimaCharlie Net for your sales fleet in your company, a useful way of doing this would be to use, Max, like your email at corp.com, using an email. It allows you to go here and say, send email to client. So if you enable this, when we provision that new user, LimaCharlie will take care of, provisioning the user, getting all the credentials, the keys, the configuration all together, and it will email it directly to the user that you've specified the email for. So that allows you to, that allows you to enroll a whole bunch of different people all at once and kind of in a self-serve manner without you having to go and do a lot of individual work with every one of them. You can just take all your emails, send email to client, and then provision those clients, and they'll receive an email that will contain detailed information about the client coming in, a QR code, and a config file. So the QR code can be used for mobile. So if you have an iPhone or an Android, scan the QR code, you're up and running. And the config file can be used, if they have, let's say, Windows desktop or things like that. There's a couple of optional components that you can specify here. Those are more useful if you have kind of a specific network topology in your company that you want to make sure that LimaCharlie Net works well with. So LimaCharlie Net will, by default, provision a random IP address in a very, very large IP range. So a 10.x.x.x in /8. So a class A IP address. If you're already using part of that, then you can ask LimaCharlie to provision an IP specifically within a range. And LimaCharlie will do its best efforts to give you, a random IP within that range. That way you can set up your routing, do all that fun stuff. You can also exclude local IP ranges. So again, this is useful if you're, you have like specific services internally that maybe you don't want to go over to VPN, over to LimaCharlie Net. And finally, DNS servers. So you can specify by default, we use 8888 and 8844, the Google provided fair DNS, but you can customize which DNS servers your client uses. Then click provision. If you put in an email will go out to that user. You will also always get a copy. You'll get a pop-up copy here. So I'm just going to make an example. So Maxim plus. Here we go. Send an email. Okay, provision. So I'm just doing provisioning. There we go. That's done. As simple as that. I will receive within a couple of seconds my QR code. There we go. My credentials. So I can take out my phone, scan the QR code, up and running. That's the web UI version. We have a couple of different ways that you can do this. The other way you can is we provide a convenience service that you can enable for your organization. So this service is, so if you go to add-ons and I search for net, so it's LC Net Install. This service right now only supports Windows, but it will allow you to transparently upgrade your Windows EDR. So let's say you have the LimaCharlie EDR agent install, automatically upgrade it to Net, install Net. It'll take care of the provisioning, the keys, the configuration, all that stuff for you. So I'll give you a short view of this. So I will get here, this guy. You can invoke it directly by opening the sensor that you want to upgrade. Obviously, all our services are also available through API, but here we've made this a little bit nicer. I go here, I say upgrade. And what this is doing is this is asking the service in the background to go and start the upgrade process on that box. It may take a minute as the service will go interactively against it. Check everything is installed, install the client, configure it, do all these things. So I won't watch paint dry, but by the end we'll come back and I'll be right there. Those two methods are very point and click, and if you know LimaCharlie, by now you know that we're not big fans of only being able to use point and click things. After all, we're making a self-serve infrastructure platform for security. People that do this at large scale, and people that do this with fairly mature organizations behind them, right? So the other ways that you can do this is through the API. Always, this. We have an API that will allow you to go and provision. So you could create very, very easily, your own portal that will go and provision endpoints for your users based on whatever parameters work for you. but also we have a CLI. So our Python command line interface supports this. So supports doing enrollment. So I will go into our documentation. There we go. Perfect. So in the provisioning section, we talked a little bit about the service, as mentioned, and then the CLI. So here's sample usage of our command line interface. The powerful aspect of this is that not only can you provision a single endpoint through the CLI, but you can also very easily give a whole bunch of different endpoints to provision all at once, or specify a file with I think it's new line separated or standard in list of endpoints that you want to provision. So doing mass provisioning is what this will give you. This is kind of the way if you want to go and onboard a whole group of people, you can do this with a single CLI call. That covers, generally speaking, the enrollment. Once you've enrolled an endpoint, as I mentioned, it will just show up here. There we go. So our demo Win 2016 Net just installed. It's up and running. That's good. So that tells you how to get up and running. Now let's get to the fun part, which is the policies. This is really the bread and butter of LimaCharlie Net. So in Net, everything works through policies. Those policies will allow you to specify, how you want to treat the behavior of the endpoints that you have, the Net endpoints that you have. By default, when you create in your organization, you create Net, you will get a default allow outbound. Very straightforward. All this is saying is, all outbound traffic is allowed by default. So everything is secure by default in LimaCharlie Net, which means, in theory, if I remove all my policies and I have endpoints connected, there will be zero access, nothing access. So for convenience, we give you an allow all outbound by default, so that any endpoint that you enroll can browse the web, can connect outside of LimaCharlie Net on the internet, no problem. But it will not be able to receive connections to it by default. So there's two policies. There's a couple of different policy types that we'll go over briefly. So let's go progressively. You can, again, manage the policies through the CLI, the API, as well as the interface here. So if you go in Net Policies, you see that we have a nice GUI for it. I'll switch to the documentation, just it's a bit clearer. So policies have some common parameters associated with them. At the end of the day, a policy is a simple YAML, document, which means that, again, if you know LimaCharlie, we like to do things as infrastructure as code. So Net policies are supported in the infrastructure as code. So you can manage a whole bunch of your users or tenants in configuration files. Transparently just push those config files to new organizations. So we have things like BPF filters that you'll see pretty often. We have times, which is the ability, what we call a time descriptor. So the ability to say this policy only applies within these boundaries. And I'll get a little bit into what that's like. And sources. So sources is a external IP address source. So that's the ability to say this policy only applies when these given endpoints connect, let's say, from on-premises, right? So you probably know what IP range your main office is on. So you can say these policies only apply when the device is connecting through this, and anything else, maybe it's a different set of policies. Time descriptors are fairly straightforward. You can specify time zone, specific epoch times if you'd like, but the real use is when specifying time of day. So you can say between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., between days of week. So when to start. So, Monday through Wednesday, days of the month, if you'd like, or month of the year as well. So you can create those simple descriptors to help you customize. The policy types. I will go at a fairly high level on these. So first policy type is firewall. This is what controls outbound connectivity from your endpoints. That's why the allow all outbound policy that is default is a firewall policy. And we're saying in that policy, just allow everything outbound. So it's done by specifying things like a BPF filter. So if you don't know BPF filter, it's a very human-friendly way of specifying what you'd like to capture or what type of traffic you'd like to match. In this case, you could say something like, TCP port 443, so for HTTPS traffic, but you could also go, host google.com, like things like that. So the firewall policy allows you to specify what you want to be able to go out or what you want to block. So the is allow true means let this go outbound. If you specify an is allow false, this will reject specifically traffic. So when traffic goes through LimaCharlie Net, we look at all the firewall policies. If no policies match, as I mentioned, it's blocked. If a policy allows it, it'll go through. However, if any policies says block, it will get blocked. So the block operation has precedence over the other ones. So it's easy then to say allow everything, but any traffic going to 3322.org, I want to block. The service policy is in a way is the reverse of this. So the service policy allows you to expose one of your LimaCharlie Net endpoints on the specific port to other LimaCharlie Net devices. So it's the ability to say, for example, I have a Jira server that's on-prem, and my salespeople that are on the road during the week, between 8 and 6, Monday to Friday, they need to access this. They're on LCNet. My server, I've added to LCNet. I can create a service policy where I will say this LimaCharlie Net endpoint, and for this one, I'll show you what that could look like. So I'll create a service policy. So I can give it a name. I can say for protocol TCP, port 443. And then let's say this is where, demo Win 2016 is where my Jira server is. And then I can select a tag. So I say all clients, all other LimaCharlie endpoint that have a specific tag. So let's say the build tag. I want to give them access to port 443 on this box. I mentioned I can add policy active times. So in this case, we were saying Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So a.m. to p.m. Any month of the year, any day of the month, and by the time zone where I want this to take effect is the Africa Lagos time zone. And create my policy. Oh, I need to give it a name. Create policy. This is a deleted sensor. I think we're not yet filtering on non-deleted sensors. Let's try this. There we go. This is a pretty dirty organization, so it's got a lot of churn. Here we go. Our service is created. Within about 5-10 seconds, the access will be granted. At 6 p.m. tonight, in that time zone, the access will be dropped automatically. So this is really straightforward to give very granular access, minimum the minimum set of permissions that people need to do their job and do things securely. The capture policy is the ability to do network capture, so PCAP, in the cloud. So this does not run on the endpoint. There's no need of like installing an additional service and doing PCAP, like spikes the CPU of that endpoint. It's entirely transparent. It's also done at the device level. So no more, I have a VPN server and, it's one pipe and I can do PCAP on part of that pipe. And then if I'm interested in the traffic of a specific box, I need to go and say, okay, at 6 a.m., what IP did this client have? And then correlate this, okay, was this IP, go back in your PCAP, truncate your PCAP, filter on LiDAT traffic. It's a pain. So here, when you create the capture policy, everything is done at the device level. So you'll create a simple policy. In this example here, we're saying 7 days of retention that I want to retain the network capture. The devices I'm interested in are all the ones that have the VPN tag. And BPF filter is empty, meaning full capture. I want everything. But I could also go and say, TCP port 80 for only HTTP traffic. Optionally, you can specify an ingestion key, but we give you a default one. Create policy. As soon as you do this, and here's an example. So in this case, TCP port 80 on all the net, 7 days retention. So that's already active. So as soon as you do this, the LimaCharlie Net in the cloud, in a scalable fashion, it'll be entirely transparent to your user. We'll start recording it. Now, again, we're LimaCharlie, we do things as infrastructure. We do the Lego blocks of security. So we don't like to produce data that doesn't plug into anything else. Like a dead end is not a good thing. So what happens is those PCAPs will come in your artifact collection. So, if you're familiar with LimaCharlie, artifact collection is where all kind of external data sources come in. So you can have Windows event logs like raw. You can have PCAPs. You can have memory dumps. Like all these things can come in. In this case, we can do this with PCAPs. So, the PCAPs, I think we have very short retention. So I'm not seeing one right now. But the PCAPs will show up just as another item, which means you can download the parsed PCAP as JSON, or you can download the original, export it, and you can do that manually or automatically through the APIs. There's another use case that plugs into that I'll get at a little bit after. I just want to finish the different policies. So DNS, the DNS policy, which I believe is the last one. So the DNS policy is the ability to control various DNS names as they're being resolved by some endpoints. So an example here of a policy is evil.com. So we're saying this policy applies to when the domain evil.com is being resolved. It has subdomain with subdomains, meaning if it's really.evil.com, this will match. The tag is empty. So here I'm saying all of my endpoints. This should be matching on all my endpoints regardless of what tags they have. And I'm saying I want this domain to resolve to the following A records. In this case, 127.0.0.1. So I'm saying anything.evil.com should get syncable. If you're doing security and in enterprise, you know that this is really, really, really useful. The ability to just go in and say, here's the command and control where this occurs. If you have LimaCharlie deployed, in 10 seconds, you create a policy that just sync holds the whole thing. That gives you time to go and kind of make a more sane remediation plan, figure out where everything is. So you can do that for this is an example of like sinkholing, but you can also create your own DNS. So we internally have our own Go links. So the ability to say, for us, test server.srv, I want this to be our internal DNS records. Maybe we expose some internal resources to this. So I can say, I want this convenience DNS to resolve for all the endpoints that have the finance tag. And here's the IP where I want this to resolve. And I'm not interested in subdomains. So I just really want test server.srv. So in the case of Go links, you could say anything Go resolves to a specific Go link server where you can do kind of your whole internal portal if you'd like, things like that. We also support not only A records, but also CNAME. So you could say test server has a CNAME here. So there's a couple of use cases that we'll get into for this. All right, we have a couple of examples below, but I think we'll be talking about them more directly. So we've shown policies. All right, use cases. Let's talk about a couple, I think some that I've already mentioned. So I'm gonna go back here. We're going to start seeing PCAPs coming in, I mentioned. It'll go into LimaCharlie artifact. If you're, and we have different webinars and training for this, but if you're familiar with artifacts, you know that you can run automated rules whenever an artifact comes in, and you can do things from there. So here's the use case. I want to take all of the PCAPs that I collect from my net endpoints, and I want to take those very bulky PCAPs that I'm going to try to limit my cost here. So I'm going to limit the amount of time that I retain those, but I want to retain at a longer scale the Zeek logs from those PCAPs. So I can come in, create a DNR rule, very basic DNR rule that we have here. What this DNR rule will do is I'm saying the artifact type PCAP on the event ingest, meaning we just received it. And the target is artifact events, so that it's not EDR events, but it's events for artifacts. I want to do the following. So in this case, I want to do a service request. So the action service request to the service called Zeek. The request itself contains an action that's called run on. I want to give it an artifact ID, which is found here. This is a reference to the event that we're getting in, that we're ingested, with a retention of 30 days. So I create this rule, hit save. Immediately after this, all the PCAPs coming in will automatically, upon ingestion, get sent into the Zeek service. The Zeek service will run over those PCAPs and result in Zeek logs. Those Zeek logs will get automatically re-ingested as artifacts. And that is what you're seeing here. That's from one of our boxes coming from Net. So I have the connection.log, the HTTP.log, all the well-known log files from Zeek. And because artifact systems support Zeek logs, it means that as those come in, again, we parse them as JSON. So we convert them from plain text into a JSON well-structured format. And again, that means that you can create another set of automated rules that look for specific things within your Zeek logs. So in a very trivial way, now you can start building and learning in LimaCharlie Net through DNR rules, which apply from everything from EDR all the way to Net and artifacts. So you can create those rules and start generating alerts. And everything that I've pointed out so far can be done through the UI, the APIs, and it's 100% cloud-based. So those PCAPs don't have to go through some on-prem thing. There's no infrastructure. It's entirely transparent from the cloud. So that's kind of one of the big use cases around capture. That's one of my favorite ones. So I've mentioned a little bit the Jira example before. So here's another use case. we have a service internally that we want to expose to users, right? So I've already discussed all of those things in one way or another. So here, if I look at this service, right, I've already said that I want to, that I want to expose this service. By default, that service will be exposed at the internal IP address, at a low level of my endpoint. So I think we were saying it's, Win 2016 that is going to be there. So I'll look at Win 2016. This is its internal IP address in LimaCharlie. So I'll copy this. I'll go into my net policies. And the service is exposed, but what I want to do is I want to give it a more friendly name for people to use. So I'm going to create the DNS, and I will call this Jira. Let's say Jira DNS. The tag, let's say for everybody. Let's say we don't really care. Let's give it Jira. I want anybody in my organization who just goes in a browser and types Jira for it to resolve directly to the service that I just exposed. Can give it this. Create a policy. Up and running. There we go. So anybody who, like your salespeople on the road, open the browser, type Jira, enter, and they're up and running. They're going to connect to that service that you're exposing. If it's outside the time of day or the boundaries or the source, all that stuff, they'll get rejected. You have complete control. And all of it in the cloud and at the device level. This is really, really nice. The last example is denying some use. So, sometimes you may have a policy in your organization, not a net policy, but like a paper policy that says all corporate documentation will be stored and saved through, Google Docs or some other solution. And, I'm picking on Dropbox for absolutely no reason here. But you may want to say, I've seen a couple of my users, my employees having a bad habit of uploading things through Dropbox. So it's kind of, shadow data transfers at an organization level. They don't know where data is going, why it's going there. So I want to prevent my users from uploading and doing things on Dropbox. So you can create a policy here as an example. So this is a DNS policy. And all I'm saying is, in this case, mobile. So I specify the tag. I say, I don't want my mobile users to use Dropbox. Dropbox.com with subdomains. To CNAME google.com. And then in this case, I put in some time of day, 8 a.m., 7 p.m., Monday through Friday, Los Angeles time. And I created the policy. So now any of my users that attempt to go to Dropbox.com, or maybe they have the client under their Windows box, sometimes they don't even know, right? It's uploading things, mirrored things in the cloud. The DNS for Dropbox.com will be automatically redirected to Google.com, which will, effectively kind of stop all this. This is done at the DNS level. You could also do this at the IP level. You could create firewall rules to prevent to go to the IP addresses that resolve to the Dropbox API. The imagination's the limit. The last use case, or the last thing that I wanted to mention is, we've looked a lot at those policies as pretty static things, right? Like, let's talk about the capture policy I have here. It specifies, a tag, and it very specifically says these boxes. Sometimes you want to get more power, right? Again, this is LimaCharlie. We tend to not give you the widget with the two ways that you can interact with it. We give you the Lego block programmable way of doing things so you can make it work for your organization. So let's say I want to combine the power of having an EDR with the power of having, full pipe filtering and all these things in LC Net. Well, what can I do? Let's say that, maybe let's go look at the DNR rules. Maybe I want to create a rule. So let's pick an existing one that's kind of It's a dummy rule that's already there. So I'm just saying here, if a process executes and the command line contains LC tracer, but it could be evil.com, that could be any DNR rule. And if you know LimaCharlie DNR rules, again, imagination tends to be the limit. If this is detected on my EDR, I would like to begin to do full network capture. How can I do this? Here's how. I'm going to add a new action as a response to this rule. The action will be add tag. The tag will be full PCAP, and I'm going to give it a TTL. So I'm going to say, when this odd behavior occurs, I want to do full capture on that box for the next, 10 minutes. So I'm going to say 600 seconds. And then the last bit, which is something new we've introduced with LimaCharlie, is entire device true. So with the introduction of LCNet, we have also started rolling out automatic detection and correlation of the different sensors you have. So I'm just going to hit modify for this. We're good to go. If I go into my devices here, this is really two different boxes, two virtual machines, not anything more. Each virtual machine is running, so Windows with the Windows visibility, hardcore EDR level. They're also running Chrome, and you may want to have visibility into request level, like activity within the browser, because so much of it is there now, and you don't want to deploy SSL interception. With the Chrome agent, so it's simple extension, that's also a sidecar sensor, meaning if you have a Windows agent, having the Chrome one doesn't cost you anything. This will give you all the visibility at, under the SSL, all the way to the specific headers, extensions installed, all that stuff. But it's a different sensor. We also have a net sensor on those boxes to get the network traffic. And again, we just covered all that. We have started correlating all of those into devices. So we will automatically detect that all these sensors are really looking at the same activity, just from a different angle. So we'll see that now in the metadata, the events coming out of LimaCharlie, there's now a DID part of your routing, which is a device ID that will correlate all those. So the DNR rule that I created, and I said, hey, if this happens, add the full PCAP tag. And I said entire device. So what I just did is I said, I know this is an EDR rule that just triggered from a process starting, but if I know that this sensor is part of a bigger device, right, with potentially multiple sensors, I want to tag all of those with this new tag. That means that when this occurs on the Windows box, right, that command line parameter, I'm also going to be tagging the net endpoint. And that means now I can create a policy that, the policy is static. It will always exist there. But I can call this full PCAP. I can say a tag of full PCAP. Pardon me, not DNS policy. I'm mixed up. So a capture policy. So policy name full PCAP. The PF filter is empty, meaning everything. Let's say 7 days retention. And here I just say full PCAP. Okay. Create policy. I need to specify. Here we go. Create policy. So now this policy is sitting there. It's not applied to anything. The moment that this behavior is detected in LimaCharlie on the EDR side, we'll add a tag to the whole device. So all three sensors potentially. And now the policy will detect that, this endpoint, this net endpoint now has the full PCAP tag. I will start doing full packet capture. So you can see how you can start really expanding the type of integration and automation that you can do. And this is just the beginning. So in the future, we will really be adding a lot of structure around this device concept. So we'll highlight to you, which sensors are really in the same device, help you manage things in that scale as well. Whew. So that's a whole lot of information. It's a whole lot of things with Net. It's our latest offering. We're really, really excited about it. We think it kind of brings a ton of value to LimaCharlie as a platform. But honestly, even more interestingly is, we're interested to see the types of use cases that you come up with. We are really looking forward for feedback. We built Net as like this first version of what we would have loved to have as a incident responder or as somebody who monitors a network. But ultimately, we're pretty sure that there's a ton of other things you haven't thought about. So if you have questions, thoughts, feedback, we're really looking forward to it and to kind of evolve the project over in that direction in the future.